Okey. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Amin. Baik. Alhamdulillah. InsyaAllah kita akan meneruskan kuliah kita seperti biasa. Jadi saya difahamkan ada yang berada di luar negara ya. Tahniah. Okey. Baik, jadi untuk hari ini kita akan sambung kuliah kita yang berikutnya. Kalau minggu lepas kita dah selesai bincangkan berkaitan dengan kekhalifahan Bani Umayyah. Okey. Jadi macam biasa, saya terdapat tulis lah kat sini ya, sebab ibu tak ada. Jadi saya nak minta antum semua masing-masing kalau ada kertas, cuba dapatkan kertas seperti biasa. Bersedialah untuk lukis atau bercatatkan nota-nota penting daripada kuliah kita. Dan nanti saya akan kongsikan gambar peta yang kita akan bincangkan pada petang ini. Di nota tu buat macam biasalah, macam biasa sebelum ni. Jadi apa yang kita akan bincangkan pada petang ini ialah berkaitan dengan tajuk yang ke-8. Sebenarnya dah nak habis dah punya. Kita skip dulu yang tajuk yang ke-7. Kita masuk terus tajuk yang ke-8. Kemudian baru kita akan pergi yang ke-7. Baik. Tajuk ke-8 Al-Khilafah Al-Abbasiyah. Hari ini tajuk kita untuk membincangkan berkaitan dengan Kerajaan Abbasiyah. Kerajaan yang menyambung, ataupun kalau minggu lepas saya dah cerita sikit berkaitan dengan bagaimana sebab-sebab antara punca utama kejatuhan Kerajaan Bani Umayyah adalah disebabkan oleh berlaku satu revolusi yang disebut sebagai revolusi Bani Abbasiyah. Disamalah macam boleh katalah revolusi ni dengan kata satu gerakan untuk menjatuhkan kerajaan yang sedia ada dan menggantikan kerajaan yang baru. Seperti mana yang kita lihat berlaku di Syria. Dan di Syria berlaku revolusi Syria itu sehingga akhirnya pada tahun ini telah menjaya menjatuhkan kerajaan pimpinan Bashar al-Assad. Dan sekarang berlaku ada kuasa kepada pimpinan yang baru. Itu revolusi. Jadi hari ini kita tengok tentang bagaimana revolusi Abbasiyah itu mengisi kelompongan politik Islam selepas kejatuhan kerajaan Bani Umayyah dan apa sumbangan dan jasa-jasa dia, warisan, tinggalan yang penting untuk kita ketahui. Kan? Sebab dia menarik jugalah untuk kita ketahui pada kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah ini disebut sebagai zaman keemasan Islam. The Golden Age of Islam. Itu kita kat mana-mana buku kita akan mendapati kenyataan tersebut. Kerana ke situlah umat Islam mencapai zaman kegemilangannya, zaman kehebatan, zaman keagungan, zaman ketinggiannya. Itu pada zaman kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah. Okey. Jadi antum semua boleh bersedia dengan buku nota masing-masing. 5, 7. Okey. Kita akan tengok tentang kekhalifahan Bani Abbasiyah. Cuma sebelum itu, seperti biasa, saya akan tayangkan satu video. Video ni pada saya dia agak lengkap. Jadi saya nak minta antum semua sepanjang tengok video tu, tak kisahlah tengah buat apa sekarang, tengah rehat ke apa ke, tapi kalau boleh cuba tangkap ataupun catatkan poin-poin penting berkaitan dengan kerajaan Abbasiyah. Walaupun dia sebut dalam bahasa Inggeris, saya rasa itu lebih mudah lah untuk kita faham berkaitan kerajaan Abbasiyah. Kemudian selepas habis video tu ataupun sambil-sambil tu saya akan terangkan jugalah beberapa poin penting yang dikongsikan dalam video tersebut. Daripada awal pembinaan Kerajaan Abbasiyah sehinggalah kejatuhannya. Okay, baik.
In the 8th century Middle East, a new dynasty seized control of one of the world's greatest empires, the Islamic Caliphate. Though little remembered in the West today, the Abbasids reigned for 5 centuries. They oversaw an era of Islamic military dominance, city building, brilliant scholarship, and technological innovation. It has come to be remembered as Islam's golden age. This is the story of the Abbasid Caliphate. (632 AD). In the Arabian city of Medina, the Prophet Muhammad lies dead. His followers, professing the new religion of Islam, sweep across the Arabian Peninsula, uniting it under the rule of Abu Bakr, the first Caliph, God's deputy on earth.
Next, let me see. Your power is 1 and you will respawn in Egypt.
I want to go to Rome. I will respawn in Rome and become a noble.
The Abbasids are an Arab family, descended from the Prophet Muhammad's uncle Al-Abbas, from whom they take their name. They and their supporters believe this blood tie to the Prophet gives them legitimate claim to the title of Caliph, far more so than the Umayyads, whom the Abbasids later portray as decadent and despised. The Abbasids promise a return to true Islam, to correct teachings and moral leadership, and send missionaries and agents out across the Caliphate to spread their message. In 747, with the Caliphate once more racked by revolt and civil war, the Abbasids will seize their chance. In eastern Khurasan, a general named Abu Muslim, probably a Persian convert, launches a revolt and takes the black banner of the Hashemites as his symbol. The Hashemites, descendants of Hashim, are the extended family of the Prophet, with the Abbasids prominent amongst them. This frontier region, today comprising northeastern Iran and parts of Turkmenistan and Afghanistan, is particularly ripe for rebellion. Here, Arabs and non-Arab converts live side by side. They intermarry and fight alongside each other to defend the frontier. For many, the Umayyads are distant and unpopular overlords. What's more, opposition has been stoked for decades by Hashemite agents and missionaries who seek to topple the Umayyads and replace them with one of their own. They have sowed the seeds of revolution. So when Abu Muslim begins his revolt, he quickly attracts followers, Arabs, Persians and Central Asians, many of whom are experienced warriors. And he proves a brilliant commander, winning a series of victories over Umayyad forces and occupying Kufa
Jadi dia bermula daripada rasa tidak puas hati kepada kerajaan Bani Umayyah itu. Jadi dia kita kata mewujudkan satu kumpulan golongan-golongan penentang ataupun pembangkang yang diketuai oleh keturunan Saidina Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib, bapa saudara Nabi. Jadi kat situlah kebanyakan kaum-kaum yang bukan Arab, kaum-kaum yang kata-kata merasa ditindas oleh pemerintah Bani Umayyah, semuanya bergabung kepada gerakan Abbasiyah ini untuk menjatuhkan ataupun menamatkan pemerintahan Bani Umayyah. Dia bermula di Khurasan. Khurasan tu di mana? Khurasan di Afghanistan lah sekarang. Mula dari situ kerana itulah wilayah yang paling jauh di sebelah timur, jauh daripada ibu kota kerajaan Damsyik. Okay.
Capital of Iraq in 749. The Abbasids now assume leadership of this revolution. And the following year, their forces meet the army of the Umayyad Caliph, Marwan II, at the Zab River. Most of what we know about the battle that follows comes from Abbasid sources. Caliph Marwan appears to have been a brave but reckless commander, launching a head-on cavalry charge against the Abbasid line. Abbasid historians tell how their own troops, inspired by recent victories, stand fast. Their spear walls repel the cavalry. The attack ends in disaster. Umayyad morale is broken, their army routed. Marwan himself flees the battle, but is pursued and killed in Egypt. Other Umayyads are likewise hunted down and exterminated.
Okay, akhirnya Khalifah terakhir Bani Umayyah, Marwan yang kedua, kalah dalam peperangan dengan Abbasiyah itu di Sungai Zab, dan akhirnya secara rasminya Bani Umayyah itu tamat bila Marwan itu sendiri dia dibunuh oleh ejen-ejen Abbasiyah, maka berakhirlah era Bani Umayyah. Dan dalam masa yang sama wujud waris ataupun ahli keluarga Bani Umayyah itu yang berjaya menyelamatkan diri sehingga ke Al-Andalus dan menubuhkan kerajaan di sana, kerajaan Bani Umayyah.
Even graves are desecrated. One surviving member of the dynasty, Abd al-Rahman, flees to Spain. Just a few years later, he establishes the Emirate of Cordoba, a second Umayyad dynasty that would flourish in Iberia for centuries. Meanwhile, Abul Abbas al-Safar becomes the first Abbasid Caliph, though it will take the Abbasids more than a decade to consolidate their hold on power.
If I had a good salary and 100,000 ringgit to invest now, here's exactly what I'd do. And by the end of this video, you'll discover a unique investment opportunity no one is talking.
Al-Safar moves the Caliph's residence from Haran to Kufa, closer to the Abbasid.
Khalifah pertama Bani Abbasiyah ialah Abu al-Abbas as-Saffah. Jadi Abu Abbas as-Saffah itu adalah khalifah pertama Bani Abbasiyah.
Power base in Persia. In 751, he sends an army to curb the westward expansion of the Chinese Tang dynasty. The campaign culminates in a bloody victory at the Battle of Talas, but also marks the limit of the Caliphate's eastward expansion. Many who'd helped overthrow the Umayyads had sought the end of hereditary rule and a return to caliphs elected from within an elite group. they are to be disappointed. In 754, Al-Safar is succeeded by his brother Al-Mansur. The Abbasids will be the new ruling dynasty.
Macam itulah. Apa yang diharapkan oleh golongan penentang sebelum ini untuk menjatuhkan Bani Umayyah, dengan harapan pemerintahan Islam akan kembali tertegak berdasarkan syura seperti Khulafa' Rashidin. Jadi mereka nak tumbangkan Bani Umayyah. Last benda yang sama juga diteruskan oleh Bani Abbasiyah. So kiranya hanya meneruskan apa yang telah dilakukan oleh sebelumnya lah. Dia bukan nak mengembalikan pun seperti mana sistem yang era Khulafa' Rashidin. Itulah.
Dynasty, and Al-Mansur will prove one of its greatest caliphs. But his reign begins inauspiciously with the execution of the brilliant and popular General Abu Muslim, now regarded as a potentially dangerous rival. Al-Mansur faces rebellion by the Alids, a powerful clan descended from the Prophet's son-in-law, Ali. They resent the growing dynastic power of the Abbasids and press their own claim to rule. Al-Mansur crushes the last major Alid revolt in 762, ushering in an era of stability, prosperity, and peace. That year, he orders the construction of a new capital on the banks of the Tigris River. Officially, it is to be known as Madinat as-Salam, the city of peace. It will prove his greatest legacy, a city that will become one of the glories of the medieval world, Baghdad. In the reign of Al-Mansur's grandson, Harun al-Rashid, the caliphate flourishes as never before, with Baghdad at its heart. There are many legends told about Caliph Harun al-Rashid, the rightly guided. He is, after all, a central figure in 1001 Nights.
Udara khalifah yang terkenal Bani Abbasiyah yang pertama Abu al-Abbas al-Saffah selaku pengasasnya, kemudian Abu Ja'far al-Mansur selaku khalifah yang kedua dan menjadi arkitek pembina kepada kota Baghdad, Madinatus Salam. Jadi kat situ berlakulah perpindahan kerajaan daripada Kufah itu ke kota baru, kota yang baru lah, Baghdad itu. Maka kat situlah kita kata kerajaan Abbasiyah mula mengembangkan dia punya identiti, kekuasaan dia dengan kita kata kita kata kemajuan yang kemudiannya datang. Kemudian diteruskan oleh cucu atau keturunannya yang bernama Harun al-Rashid. Ini nama-nama penting lah dalam kekhalifahan Bani Abbasiyah. Di Khalifah Harun al-Rashid itu kata-kata dia antara yang khalifah yang menonjol lah. Disebut sebagai zaman kegemilangan, di situlah pada zamannya. Ada yang anggap Khalifah Harun al-Rashid, Khalifah al-Rashid yang kelima. Ada juga yang kata bukan. Apapun pada zaman Khalifah Harun al-Rashid, Kerajaan Abbasiyah mencapai puncak yang tinggi lah dalam segala aspek kehidupan.
Nights, the masterpiece of Arabic literature. The image of al-Rashid that reaches us from such sources is of a devout, wise and beneficent ruler who prayed 100 times a day and each morning gave 1,000 dirhams to good causes.
Assalamu alaikum. We have great news from the north of Gaza Strip, where we continue to ensure
In legend, al-Rashid wandered the streets of Baghdad disguised as a beggar to see how his subjects lived. He was a brilliant horseman and patron of the arts, and a keen chess player. His court was a place where religion and philosophy could be argued and debated openly, even, on occasion, by a woman. In the Caliphate, as in the rest of the medieval world, few women held high status in their own right. But as mothers, wives and concubines, they could exert huge influence. Al-Hazuran, once a Yemeni slave girl, rose from concubine to Caliph's wife, and wielded significant power during the reign of her husband, Caliph al-Mahdi, and son, Caliph al-Rashid. Famed for her intelligence and learning, she held discussions on policy and military strategy, received foreign ambassadors, and intervened on questions of justice. Much of her own enormous wealth she spent on public works and charity. Many likened her to a co-ruler, or even the real caliph. The success of al-Rashid's reign was underpinned by efficient government and administration. Much of it was modelled on that of their predecessors, the Sassanids, and they made extensive use of Persian and Central Asian bureaucrats. Of particular note was the Barmakid family. The Barmakids were descended from high priests of the Buddhist temple of Nobahar, near Balkh, in modern Afghanistan. As early Abbasid allies, they played an important role in government, helping to foster an age of Islamic statecraft, imbued with elements of Sasanian Persian culture. They served the Abbasids well for 3 generations, but the power games of court could be dangerous and unpredictable. In 803, al-Rashid decided the Barmakids had got a little too big for their boots. The family experienced a sudden and dramatic fall from favour, with many of its members imprisoned or executed. Their demise ended Barmakid control of the post of vizier, a position that had recently emerged at court as the Caliph's senior advisor and chief minister. It was a role of enormous significance. Some viziers would later wield so much power, they overshadowed the Caliph himself. The fame of al-Rashid's court spread far and wide. Charlemagne, king of the Franks, Holy Roman Emperor and the most powerful ruler in Europe, sent several embassies to Baghdad. In return, al-Rashid sent him dazzling gifts, including perfume, ivory chessboards.
Okey, yang ni dari sudut hubungan diplomatik. Jadi pada zaman Kerajaan Abbasiyah, dari sudut politik, memang dia memiliki hubungan diplomatik dengan Eropah. Waktu itu, Kerajaan Perancis, Kingdom of France, di Kerajaan Perancis lah. Jadi kalau sekarang cerita, Kerajaan Abbasiyah dia berbaik dengan Perancis kerana apa? Kerana di sebelah Perancis adalah Emirate of Cordoba, Bani Umayyah Cordoba. Bani Umayyah Cordoba ni dia musuh ataupun pesaing kepada Bani Abbasiyah. Dan dalam masa yang sama, di sebelah Abbasiyah tu pula ada kerajaan Eastern Roman Empire, kerajaan Byzantine. Jadi kiranya apa yang berlaku, Abbasiyah berbaik dengan Frank supaya Frank mengganggu kerajaan Cordoba. Manakala Cordoba pula berbaik dengan Eastern Roman Empire supaya mengganggu ataupun menjadi penghalang lah, buat kacau lah dekat wilayah kerajaan Abbasiyah. Jadi macam tu lah. Ini kita tahu 4 kuasa besar lah kan, ketika itu di Eropah dan di di Timur Tengah. Ini dah sudut politik luar. Boleh catat, catat nota politik luar apa yang berlaku.
A marvellous water clock, and even an elephant named Abu Abbas, which lived for several years at Charlemagne's court in Aachen.
If you are in the architecture industry, you want to use tools that are quick and easy. The software that I will show you today is exactly that, quick and easy. But on top of that, it has a lot of other qualities. That's why today I'm going to introduce you to a piece.
Cultural life in the Caliphate, and Baghdad in particular, was remarkably cosmopolitan. The Abbasid court even celebrated Persian holidays, such as Nowruz, Persian New Year.
Ini berkaitan dengan sosial. Bagaimana kehidupan ataupun keadaan sosial zaman kerajaan Abbasiyah. Maksudnya Abbasiyah ni sangat, kita kata, toleran. Sebab ialah pelbagai rakyat, pelbagai bangsa yang bernaung hidup di bawah pemerintahan mereka, maka kerajaan Abbasiyah ni lebih inklusif. Sebagai bandingan Bani Umayyah tu, Bani Umayyah dia banyak utamakan kaum Arab, bangsa Arab, terutamanya Bani Umayyah sahaja. Jadi kat situ menyebabkan ada setengah pihak atau setengah puak yang tidak senang dengan Bani Umayyah. Tapi Abbasiyah, mereka boleh adapt. Dia boleh menerima masukan kaum-kaum selain daripada Arab. Bahkan mereka sangat toleran, hatta perayaan Nowruz. Ini perayaan Nowruz ni perayaan Parsi yang disambut oleh masyarakat Parsi ketika itu. Dan pun diraikan juga pada ketika itu sebagai satu bentuk toleransi lah. Dan ini menarik lah untuk kita tengok.
Such open-mindedness helped the Caliphate to flourish as a centre of culture, science, arts and medicine. The centre of learning was the city's famous library, Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom, though little of its function is known today. Here and across the Caliphate, scholars translated classical works from Greek, Middle Persian and Sanskrit into Arabic. Their efforts ensured the survival of countless works that would otherwise have been lost, including those by great figures such as Aristotle and Galen. They also made many of their own original discoveries, knowledge that would come to be much sought after by the medieval West. Baghdad.
Zaman kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah di Baghdad menyaksikan perkembangan sains, perkembangan keilmuan, ditambah pula dengan Baitul Hikmah yang ada ketika itu sebagai pemangkin kepada kebangkitan ilmu pengetahuan dalam tamadun Islam. Kat situlah kita akan temui banyak ramai nama tokoh-tokoh Islam yang terlibat dalam keilmuan yang semuanya muncul ataupun yang hidup di era kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah.
Baghdad's scholars led the world in many fields. Al-Kindi, known as the philosopher of the Arabs, was a famed polymath who wrote on logic, psychology, astronomy, astrology, and many other topics. Al-Khwarizmi's contribution to mathematics led to him being dubbed the father of algebra. The Latinized version of his name, Algoritmus, is the origin of our word algorithm. The Christian scholar Hunayn ibn Ishaq was nicknamed the Sheikh of Translators for his role translating ancient texts into Arabic. Material culture also flourished under the Abbasids, with the introduction of glazed pottery in the 9th century, allowing new artistic possibilities. Many colourful pieces, decorated with animals and Kufic lettering, have been discovered across the former caliphate from this period. The Abbasid Caliphate also benefited from its position astride the Silk Roads, the name for the ancient network of trade routes linking Europe and Asia. Valuable imports travelled along this route, such as silk, spices, ivory, gemstones, and even thoroughbred horses. To encourage this trade, the Abbasids built new roads, as well as inns, hospices, and wells for the comfort of travelers.
Yang ni dari sudut ekonomi. Dari sudut ekonomi, perdagangan semakin rancak pada zaman kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah. Dibina berbagai kemudahan untuk berdagang, ada tempat persinggahan, rumah, tumpangan, telaga-telaga air dan sebagainya. Semua itu untuk memudahkan para pedagang datang. Ditambah pula dengan laluan sutera berjaya dihidupkan kembali. Dan semakin rancaklah perdagangan dengan kota Baghdad berada di tengah-tengah laluan sutera itu.
Travelers. New ideas and technology also flowed along the Silk Roads. Chinese paper-making techniques first reached the Muslim world under the Umayyads, but it was under the Abbasids that paper production really took off. Much cheaper than parchment or papyri, abundant supplies of paper transformed the practice of administration and bookmaking, and helped medieval Islam to become one of the most bookish cultures in world history.
Let me respawn in Rome, please. Yes. This city looks shabby. I'll develop it. But what should I develop? Business, definitely. Let's build a commercial area first, and people will soon come to spend their money. Building roads is the first step to becoming rich. Let's build the main streets first. Then we'll build a food zone. Burgers, pizzas, and tacos, you name it, I've got it. What? Overflowing garbage? Just dump it in the...
In the 7th century, the first Arab conquests had pushed the frontier of the Eastern Roman Empire back to the Taurus Mountains. Since then, the Caliphate and Empire had been in a state of almost perpetual war, with frequent raids by both sides across the Syrian frontier. Twice the Arabs had even besieged Constantinople itself, but failed to take the great city. In 782, al-Rashid himself had led an Abbasid force as far as the shores of the Bosphorus. By 804, the Eastern Roman Empire was paying annual tribute to the Caliphate, when Emperor Nikephoros stopped the payments. An Abbasid army crossed the Taurus Mountains and took his army by surprise at Knossos. The Romans suffered a heavy defeat. The emperor himself was lucky to escape with his life. The cycle of raid and counter-raid continued for years, with al-Rashid even moving the Abbasid capital to Raqqa to be closer to the frontier. But this fixation on his rival to the west may have blinded the Caliph to trouble in the east. In 809, news arrived of revolt in Khorasan. It was while travelling east to face down this rebellion that Caliph Harun al-Rashid became sick and died. His 22-year reign would come to be seen as a golden age for the Abbasid Caliphate, a time of prosperity, stability, intellectual and cultural achievement. But al-Rashid's own efforts to ensure a peaceful succession were about to backfire disastrously and plunge the Caliphate back into civil war. The Abbasid Caliphate had flourished under the reign of Caliph Harun al-Rashid. And to ensure its continued success, he arranged his succession in a way that he believed would ensure stability and peace. His son, Muhammad, was to be his heir, but in a move common since the time of the Umayyads, he also named another son, Abdullah, as Muhammad's heir. It proved a recipe for disaster.
What if your money could quietly grow in the background while you're watching K-dramas or enjoying your coffee? What if your paycheck could work harder than you? Let's talk about the first.
In 809, in Baghdad, Muhammad succeeded his
Jadi selepas pemergian ataupun kewafatan Khalifah Harun al-Rashid, berlaku perang saudara di antara kedua-dua orang anak dia, Al-Amin dan Al-Ma'mun.
succeeded his father as caliph, taking the title Al-Amin, the Trustworthy. His half-brother, Abdullah, became governor of Khorasan with the title Al-Ma'mun, the Trusted One. Rival factions soon formed at both courts. In Baghdad, Al-Amin's advisors urged him to remove his brother from the succession. And just a year into his reign, he tore up his father's arrangement. Al-Ma'mun was furious. Fraternal distrust exploded into civil war. Al-Ma'mun's Khorasani forces won a great victory against a much larger force at Ray and marched on to besiege Baghdad in 812. After a bloody year-long siege, the city fell. Caliph Al-Amin was captured as he tried to flee and executed. Initially, Al-Ma'mun ruled the caliphate from his old base at Merv. Here, in an effort to widen his support after the civil war, he fostered a new alliance with the Alids. This powerful family was descended from Ali, fourth caliph and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. They'd later become leaders of Shia Islam, the branch of Islam that believes true spiritual authority belongs to Ali's descendants.
Pada zaman ini muncul juga satu gerakan Syiah. Gerakan Syiah.
Descendants. Instead of traditional Abbasid black, Al-Ma'mun's court began to wear green, a colour associated with the Alids. Al-Ma'mun even married two of his daughters into the Alid family, and made Alid Imam Ali al-Rida his heir apparent. But these policies sparked hostility back in Iraq, and led to major revolts in Baghdad. After 6 years, the Caliph moved the capital back there to restore order, and abandoned his Alid alliance. Al-Ma'mun is also remembered for his attempts to impose a new religious doctrine on the Caliphate. He first invited distinguished scholars to Baghdad to discuss theological issues, such as the deeds of the companions of the Prophet, the Hadiths, and the nature of the Quran. However, his pronouncement that the Quran was at some point created by God, rather than co-eternal with God, encountered bitter resistance. 18 years of religious persecution followed, a period known as the Minha, or Inquisition.
Kemudian pada zaman Abbasiyah ni juga berlaku satu peristiwa lah. Pada zaman Khalifah Al-Ma'mun, Al-Mihnah. Al-Mihnah ni tribulasi yang mana kerajaan ketika itu dia memaksakan satu fahaman Al-Quran itu adalah baharu kepada seluruh Islam, dan hal ini sudah pasti ditentang oleh ulama-ulama yang lain lah. Antaranya Imam Ahmad yang menolak fahaman tersebut, dan beliau dikenakan hukuman lah. Jadi ramailah ulama yang kena ditimpa mihnah ini, ditangkap dan disebat hanya kerana tidak mahu menerima fahaman ataupun ajaran yang dibawa oleh kerajaan ketika itu, dan ia terpengaruh dengan fahaman Mu'tazilah. Itu yang berlaku lah. Jadi ulama-ulama Sunni yang tidak Mu'tazilah, mana yang menolak, mereka akan dihukum.
Which saw dissenting scholars imprisoned or even executed. In 833, Al-Mamun was succeeded by his brother, who took the title Al-Mutasim. He'd prove far less interested in theological debate than the clash of arms. The armies of the Abbasid Caliphate, renowned in battle, were drawn from both Arab and non-Arab subjects. The Khorasanis, soldiers of the frontier province of Khorasan, were the troops who'd helped propel the Abbasids to power during the Third Fitna, or Islamic Civil War. Drawing on Persian and steppe warrior traditions, their ranks included both armoured infantry and heavy armoured cavalry, similar to European knights.
Kemudian pada zaman kemuncak Abbasiyah ini, mereka memiliki pasukan tentera yang terlatih. Tapi kebanyakannya datang daripada Khurasan lah. Jadi mereka ni jadi pasukan tentera elit lah. Tentera yang terlatih, yang kuat lah ketika itu kan. Ini antara dari sudut politik kan. Memiliki pasukan tentera yang kuat.
The descendants of Khorasanis who settled near Baghdad were known as Abna al-Khorasan, sons of the people of Khorasan. Famed as elite and versatile infantrymen, they formed the loyal core of the Caliph's army. Other notable contingents included the Dailamis, expert skirmishers from the highlands of northern Persia. While African troops, including military slaves and Muslim converts from Ethiopia, fought as heavy infantry, armed with shield, sword and spear. The great Caliph Harun al-Rashid was known to have an elite bodyguard of 40 African soldiers. Abbasid armies were particularly skilled in siege warfare and made expert use of catapults, mangonels and battering rams. They even had specialist troops armed with naphtha or petroleum-based fire weapons. No contemporary illustrations are known, but they're thought to have been similar to this slightly later Byzantine illustration. The 9th century, however, would see changes so radical that some historians have termed it a military revolution. During the civil war between al-Rashid's sons, al-Mu'tasim had begun to expand his military retinue by purchasing Turkish slave soldiers. His favorite supplier was the Samanid family, governors of Transoxiana.
Say goodbye to Slack because chat's here and it's inside ClickUp. Everything you need in chat is here. Like
Okay, pada peringkat yang pertama, banyak pasukan tentera yang direkrut oleh Kerajaan Abbasiyah adalah terdiri daripada Khurasan, Dailam. Nah, itu antara yang utama lah. Jadi apabila masuk kepada era Khalifah Al-Tawqil, maka kat situ ditukar pula. Ini golongan tentera ini kebanyakannya didominasi oleh bangsa Turki pula. Ini berlaku pada Khalifah Al-Tawqil.
These slave soldiers were seized from their villages as boys, or bought in slave markets, then sent for intensive military training alongside an Islamic education. They emerged as formidable cavalrymen and superbly skilled mounted archers. Al-Jahith, a contemporary, wrote of them with awe. The Turks are as good as others with the lance, and in addition, if 1,000 of their horsemen are hard-pressed, they will loose all their arrows in a single volley and bring down 1,000 enemy horsemen. No body of men can stand up to such a test. Historians dispute the exact timeline, but at some point in the 9th century, these Turkish slave soldiers, known as Mamluks, had come to form an elite corps within the Abbasid army, one that was personally loyal to the Caliph and could be used to intimidate his political rivals. Turkish officers, despite their initial outsider status and ignorance of Arabic language and customs, began to wield huge influence at the Caliph's court. This offended the old nobility, many of whom also stopped receiving traditional diwan payments for their military service. The discontent even pushed some soldiers to riot in the streets of Baghdad. To ease tension, al-Mu'tasim constructed a new city for the Turkish military elite, Samarra. This was where he garrisoned the Turks and rewarded their commanders with land. And it's where, in 848, work began on the world's largest mosque and its famous spiral minaret. Al-Mu'tasim's reliance on slave soldiers to shore up his power had destroyed centuries of military tradition, and it had sown the seeds of future turmoil. 2 years later, the Caliph led his formidable new army against the old foe, the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire. The campaign ended in a great victory, the capture and sack of Amorium. O day of the Battle of Amorium, our hopes have returned from you, overflowing with honey-sweet milk, wrote Arab poet Abu Tamam. But even such victories failed to ease the tension between Turkish officers and Abbasid nobles. Some nobles even plotted to overthrow al-Mu'tasim and expel the Turks. but their conspiracy was discovered and they were executed.
For smaller account, one way to grow it faster is to have a more active trading style. I started with small account as well, right? I still remember my
Al-Mutasim was succeeded by his eldest son, Al-Wathik. Following his unexpected death, a second son, Al-Mutawakkil, took the throne, backed by the Turk generals. They'd hoped for a pliable puppet, but instead, Al-Mutawakkil decided it was time to reassert caliphal authority. On his orders, several Turkish leaders were assassinated, and he tried to use Arab and Armenian troops to counterbalance their influence. But the Turks struck back. In 861, the Caliph was assassinated by his own bodyguards. The chaos and civil war that followed is known as the Decade of Anarchy. 4 caliphs took power, all puppets of the Turkish military elite. Each, in turn, was violently overthrown. Order was only restored with the accession of Caliph al-Mu'tamid in 870. But the anarchy had irreparably damaged the Caliph's authority. Even before the Abbasids came to power, the vast Caliphate had struggled to maintain control of its many regions. Abbasid authority west of Egypt had long been largely theoretical. But now, multiple major uprisings broke out, as local governors and warlords staked out their own claims to rule. Egypt, fertile and prosperous, was an early casualty, lost to a rebel Turkish commander who founded his own Tulunid dynasty. In southern Iraq, a major
Di masa zaman kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah ni dah juga wujud kerajaan Duwailiyat. Duwailiyat ni adalah kerajaan kecil yang ada di dalam kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah. Di masa itu kita tengoklah beberapa kerajaan yang wujud. Asalnya dia tu gubernur kepada Abbasiyah saja. Akhirnya dia mengisytiharkan dia lah sebagai raja, sebagai amir, sebagai pemerintah yang tertinggi di wilayah tersebut. Dan tapi apapun mereka berada di bawah khalifah. Cuma kat situ nampaklah seolah macam mereka mendapatkan kuasa autonomi untuk memerintah sendiri, lebih luas, lebih banyak kuasa yang dia dapat.
major revolt broke out
Ini
among
antara kerajaan-kerajaan Duwailiyat lah. Tulun,
agricultural slaves from Eastern Africa, known as Zanj. The 14-year uprising devastated the region and severely disrupted Abbasid tax income and Baghdad's food supply. In Afghanistan, a coppersmith named Yaqub al-Safar made an astonishing rise to power, founding his own Safarid dynasty and conquering much of eastern Persia. His advance was only halted at the Battle of Deir al-Akul in 876. In such turbulent times, Abbasid caliphs struggled to impose their authority. But there were some successes.
If I had a good salary and 100,000 ringgit to invest now, here's exactly what I'd do. And by the end of this video, you'll discover a unique investment opportunity no one is talking about. Dato Michael Tan here. Over the last 15 years, I have steadily
Caliph al-Mu'tadid engineered a brief Abbasid resurgence, thanks to military campaigning and shrewd diplomacy. Notably his marriage to the daughter of the Tulunid ruler of Egypt. She was the celebrated Kutra al-Nada. Her name means dewdrop. One scholar described her as one of the most intelligent and regal women who ever lived. When al-Mu'tadid told his bride, "You've done well for yourself by marrying the Caliph. What more could you thank God for?" She replied, "You've done well for yourself. This makes my father your subject. What more could you thank God for?" Her bold response was a sign of her character, as well as the delicate new balance of power between Abbasid caliphs and some of their more powerful subjects. During the reign of al-Mu'tadid's son, al-Muqtafi, Tulunid Egypt was fully reabsorbed into the Abbasid Caliphate. But elsewhere, the news was dire. Abbasid authority collapsed in Arabia, where one Shiite group, the Qarmatians, even began attacking pilgrims on their way to Holy Mecca. In
Berlaku gerakan Syiah Karamitah ini, mereka datang menyerang Kaabah dan mencuri Hajarul Aswad. Ini berlaku dalam sejarah.
1930, they stole the Black Stone, the Holy of Holies, from the Kaaba, a terrible blow to Abbasid prestige. In Central Asia, the Persian Samanids carved out their own empire and declared independence. This was the height of the so-called Persian Intermezzo, when native Persian dynasties ruled in Persia once more. Increasingly, the Abbasid Caliph was said to reign, but not rule. He'd become a symbol without power, often under the thumb of his vizier. By the 930s, the Caliph had lost control of both the civilian administration and army command, which was handed over to a new official, the Amir al-Umara, commander of the commanders.
Jadi pada zaman ini, pada kita kata khalifah dah kehilangan kuasa pentadbiran, hanya sebagai simbol saja. Yang mengurus tadbir negara jatuh kepada Amir al-Umara. Ini banyaklah, Abbasiyah ni panjang cerita dia. Kalau kita tengok. Apa nanti saya akan rumuskan itu insyaAllah.
The final humiliation came in 945. The Buyids were Shiite warlords from the Dailam mountains of northwestern Persia. But their first success was in Fars, before they went on to seize control of Persia and Iraq. Their triumphal entry into Baghdad was a deep humiliation for the Sunni Abbasids. Yet they retained the title of Caliph, as no more than figureheads under Buyid command, and spectators to these turbulent times. 2 decades later, another Shiite dynasty, the Fatimids, swept along the North African coast, conquered Egypt, and founded Cairo as the capital of their own caliphate. Some historians label this the Shiite century, with Shiite dynasties ruling twin caliphates and dominating much of the Muslim world. But it was not to last. A dangerous new Sunni power was poised to burst out of Central Asia: the Seljuk Turks.
Let me respawn in Rome, please. Yes!
A sneaky thief wiped me out overnight. Looks like I'll have to start all over again.
The Seljuk Turks were pastoralists, nomadic livestock farmers from the Central Asian steppe. They were fierce warriors who became champions of Sunni Islam. At the end of the 10th century, possibly in response to climate change, they swept south into Khorasan. The Ghaznavid Empire, successor to the Samanids, was first to fall. The Seljuk Turks were unstoppable, surging westwards across the Persian plateau, taking Baghdad and toppling the Buyids, crushing a Byzantine army at Manzikert, and forging the great Seljuk Empire. Their triumph was tempered by the arrival of European crusaders, who took Jerusalem in 1099 and carved out a series of crusader states. One Shia sect, shrouded in legend, struck back at the Seljuks with deadly precision. In 1092, Nizam al-Mulk, vizier of the Seljuk Empire, was killed by the Order of Assassins, its hit squad disguised as Sufi mystics. The Assassins, or Hashashin as they're known in Arabic, were a new Ismaili military order, formed in the mountains of northwestern Persia. Facing powerful enemies, but without an army of their own, they turned to subterfuge and assassination to achieve their goals. Many fanciful stories are told about the Assassins, but the order was real and feared, and responsible for scores of political murders over the next 2 centuries. Under the Seljuks, Abbasid caliphs continued to reign as spiritual leaders and figureheads. But the 12th century saw the fracturing of the great Seljuk Empire, a familiar story of disputed successions and local governors making their bid for power. Sensing weakness, in 1136, Abbasid Caliph al-Muqtafi raised his own army to reassert Abbasid independence for the first time in nearly 2 centuries. He took control of Baghdad, and in 1157 held it against a Seljuk siege. After generations of foreign subjugation, the Abbasids had re-emerged as an independent power. But it would soon all come crashing down.
Okey, masuk plus bahagian terakhir Mongol. Jadi Mongol lah lambatkan kerajaan Bani.
In the 13th century, a new force from the east tore through the Islamic world, scattering armies and destroying every city that did not submit to them. The Mongols. First to fall, the Khwarezmian Empire, successor to the Seljuks, overrun by the Mongol hordes of Genghis Khan. By 1256, his grandson, Hulagu, was poised to renew the onslaught. But first, he turned his attention to the Assassins, rumoured to be plotting his death. The order was scattered and crushed. 2 years later, Hulagu advanced against the Abbasid Caliphate. As his armies neared Baghdad, he sent a stern warning to Caliph al-Mustasim, demanding the city's surrender. Despite the Mongols' terrifying record of destroying any city that opposed them, Al-Mustasim decided Baghdad's walls could keep out any steppe nomads. He was wrong. After half Baghdad's garrison was massacred in a disastrous sortie, the city surrendered. But Hulagu was in no mood for mercy. A contemporary chronicler described the horrors that followed. The people of Baghdad were put to the sword and subjected to 40 days of killing, pillaging and enslavement. They tortured people to extort their wealth. They killed men, women and children. A great part of the city, including the Caliph's mosque, was burnt, and the city laid in ruins. The dead lay like mounds in the streets and markets. The death toll is unknown, but was in the many thousands. Allegedly, only Christians were spared, thanks to the intercession of Hulagu's Christian wife. Baghdad's libraries were destroyed, their books and manuscripts, representing centuries of Muslim scholarship, were thrown into the Tigris River, so that it was said to run black with ink. Al-Mustasim was forced to witness this terrible destruction. Then, according to several sources, he was rolled in a carpet and trampled to death, as Mongols feared.
Ini pengakhiran kepada Khalifah Al-Mustasim. Beliau dibaringkan di dalam kapet, digulung lah kan, digulung, lepas tu dipijak-pijak dengan kudanya Mongol itu, dan dipijak sampai mati lah. Kerana mereka, orang Mongol ni kan dia pagan. Dia takut ataupun dia percaya kalau dia bunuh keturunan diraja ni, dia akan memberi nasib yang malang kepada mereka. Jadi dia buatlah benda yang tidak menumpahkan darah. Tapi bunuhlah Khalifah.
To spill royal blood. The last Caliph of Baghdad was dead. Never again would the Abbasids hold meaningful political power. Al-Mustasim was not the last Abbasid Caliph. The line would continue under the Mamluk Sultanate that now ruled Egypt. But his successors in Cairo were merely ceremonial figures, religious leaders with little power. The last Caliph, Al-Mutawakkil III, surrendered to the Ottoman Empire in 1517 and was taken away as a prisoner to Constantinople. It was a humiliating fate for a dynasty that had once ruled one of history's greatest empires, one that had dominated the Middle East, that had taken on and defeated the Byzantines in the West and Chinese in the East, that had overseen a great flourishing of scholarship, culture, technology and trade, and reigned over the era that is remembered as Islam's golden age. For centuries to come, Islamic leaders would assert their legitimacy by claiming descent from this one towering dynasty, the Abbasids. Big thanks to all.
Masya Allah. Nah, ni satu, kita kata dia panjang sikit lah. Dia hantar semua, kalau rasa nak tak puas nak tengok sendiri, boleh Google dia, tajuk ni, video ni, dokumentari lah saya rasa. Lengkap lah cerita tentang jatuh bangun kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah. Saya rasa pun dia lengkap lah kan. Tapi tak apa, jadi sebelum kita berakhir, kita akan pergi sekali imbas berkaitan dengan nota kita. Jadi daripada poin-poin penting tadi, saya harap ada yang catat lah poin-poin penting. Jadi kita akan tengok sikit berkaitan dengan nota kita. Kita sentuh sikit berkaitan dengan nota. Itulah setakat ni video-video bahasa Inggeris ni lebih kemas lah kan. Mereka ni serius mengkaji sejarah kan, walaupun sejarah Islam. Kita masih lagi belum berupaya lagi. Okey, baik. InsyaAllah sebelum kita berakhir, ini yang penutup. Nanti kalau kelas yang esok saya ada kelas juga dari Hadarah ni, bersemuka dengan diorang. Tengok nanti kalau ada nota-nota apa nanti saya akan kongsikan kepada antum semua. Mungkin ada poin-poin penting. Sebab masa kalau online ni payah nak tulis kan. Okey. Baik, boleh buka muka surat 157. Okey. Ini adalah senarai nama Khalifah 10 yang pertama. Okey. Dan kita lihat tahun 6.1 tarikh Ifahi wa Hukmu Daulah Abbasiyah. Ni kita kata sejarah pengasasan kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah itulah. Pada Daulah Abbasiyah min Salalatu Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib. Okey. Bahasa daripada keturunan Al-Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib, pakcik Nabi SAW. Kemudian dia Bani Hashim. Okey, bermula ni gerakan Bani Abbasiyah itu yang dipimpin oleh Ali bin Abdullah bin Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib, iaitu cucu kepada Al-Abbas. Jadi kat situlah dia fi takwini harakah Abbasiyah urifa bi ismi harakah Al-Hashimiyah, yang mula-mula yang kita mewujudkan satu gerakan yang bernama gerakan Al-Hashimiyah, iaitu cucu kepada Al-Abbas, Ali bin Abdullah bin Abbas. Jadi daripada situlah bermulanya gerakan pemberontakan atau gerakan revolusi Abbasiyah untuk menumbangkan kerajaan Bani Umayyah. Ba'da wafati Ali bin Abdullah Kuliah ibnuhu Muhammad, kemudian anak dia Muhammad bin Ali menjadi penggantilah ketua kepada revolusi tersebut. Okey. Kemudian dalam masa yang sama yang turut disokong oleh gerakan Abbasiyah ini adalah A'immatus Syiah, puak Syiah lah. Pada mada diayah munahadha li khilafah Umayyah. Jadi puak Hashimiyah dan Syiah ini masing-masing menyebarkan dakwah, kita kata menyebarkanlah dakwah mereka untuk menentang kerajaan Bani Umayyah. Kan? Situlah berlakunya revolusi. Inqasama Kifah Abbasiyah ila marhalatain. Okey, kita bagi pada dua peringkat. Kemudian dia macam biasalah, dia mula dengan gerakan nafsiyah, gerakan sembunyi-sembunyi ya. Kemudian barulah marhalah saniyah al-harbul maftuhah, barulah mula dengan revolusi bersenjata. Kemudian ikhtar qadatu hadhihi harakah muntaqati ra'isain huma Kufah wal Khurasan. Tadi disebut dua kota utama yang menjadi pusat gerakan revolusi ini adalah Kufah dengan Khurasan. Dua kota ini kita kata paling ramailah orang yang tak puas hati dengan Bani Umayyah. Dan dia pun Kufah dan Khurasan ni pun jauh daripada Damsyik. Okey, kemudian ba'da wafatu Muhammad bin Ali intaqala qiyada ila ibnuhu Ibrahim. Kemudian disambung oleh Ibrahim yang menghantar Abu Muslim ila Khurasan li qiyadatil jaysh. Kemudian muncul satu tokoh namanya Abu Muslim. Abu Muslim ini dihantar ke Khurasan untuk merekrut pasukan tentera. Jadi pasukan tentera yang dibawa oleh Abu Muslim ni lah kita kata sangat kuat, berjaya mengalahkan tentera Bani Umayyah. Okey, kemudian selepas kalah, banyaklah ni lebih kurang sama je cerita dia. Ba'da hazimat Jais Umawi, setelah kalah tentera Umayyah yang dipimpin oleh Marwan bin Muhammad atau Marwan II, dan saat khilafah Abbasiyah secara rasminya kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah diasaskan. Wa thamma ta'yin Abu Al-Abbas As-Saffah, jadi Abu Abbas As-Saffah jadi khalifah yang pertama. Wa naqila markaz hukum Islami min Dimashq ila Baghdad, kemudian dipindah dari Damsyik ke Baghdad. Jadi dalam tempoh ini hadasat taghayyurat kabira fi nizam siyasi wa idari. Kemudian berlakulah perubahan yang besar dalam sistem politik Islam. Bima fi zalika musyarakatu furs fi qita'il am wa ta'yin ulama kal mutasyarin. Jadi buat pada zaman kerajaan Abbasiyah ini masyarakat Parsi atau bangsa Parsi bukan Arab terlibat sama dalam pentadbiran negara. Kalau zaman Bani Umayyah tu hanya fokus kepada bangsa Arab saja. Okey, lain-lain itulah, ada banyak lagi lah. Antaranya kita kata kalau kita lihat okey, ini zaman Khalifah Al-Mutawakkil, dukhulu ta'sir Turki, mula memasuki pengaruh Turki mula masuk dalam kekhalifahan. Zaman Al-Mutawakkil macam yang dalam video tadi. Kemudian tentera Turki ini pula yang sendiri yang membunuh Khalifah Al-Mutawakkil tu. Banyaklah cerita dia. Apa lagi? Ini antaranya lah. Wajah Daulah Abbasiyah tahdiyat min jama'an mutamaridah. Jadi kerajaan Abbasiyah terpaksa menghadapi gerakan-gerakan pemberontakan seperti Safarin yang Syiah lah, Karamitah, Syiah juga. Syiah juga ni, semua kelompok Syiah ni lah. Dia tak puas hati dengan kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah, kerana setelah kerajaan Abbasiyah didirikan, golongan Syiah diketepikan. Jadi mereka tak puas hati lah kan. Okey, kemudian apa lagi? Ini solat. Kemudian Saljuk, muncul kerajaan Saljuk, berjaya mengalahkan kerajaan Buai dan menguasai kota Baghdad. Ini macam saya tadi disebut. Sakata Daulah Abbasiyah ba'da hujum min Mongol ala Baghdad. Pada tahun 656, jatuh di tangan Mongol yang membawa kepada berakhirnya salah satu daripada kerajaan Islam yang sangat pengaruh ketika itu. Kerajaan Abbasiyah memerintah dalam lebih kurang 500 tahun. Lama. Okey. Kemudian kita al-idarah wa tawassul al-hadari fi asri Abbasi. Ini macam tadi ada banyak disebut dalam video tadi, aspek-aspek ketamadunan. Senang cerita, zaman Abbasiyah ni zaman kegemilangan. Sebut je apa-apa kegemilangan pada zaman abad pertengahan itu semuanya ada pada zaman Abbasiyah. Bolehlah. Boleh sambil tu tengok, highlightkan. Kemudian dari segi politik dia ada Wazirul A'zam, Ra'isul Wuzara, daripada ada menteri. Kemudian ada Muassasah Hajib, ada Hajib. Hajib ni adalah kita kata protokol khalifah. Kemudian apa lagi ada? Dalam pembinaan kota, fi bina'il mudun, Khalifah Al-Mansur membina kota Baghdad. Dia kata saya sebut tadi. Kemudian dalam bidang majalah ta'lim wal ma'rifah, dalam bidang pendidikan dan keilmuan, kerajaan Abbasiyah telah mencapai tingkatan yang tinggi, banyak membina muassasat ta'limiyah, yang membina institusi pendidikan. Kemudian apa lagi? Kemudian dia fokus kat sini lah, ta'lim fi asri Abbasi. Dari sudut pendidikan lah, sistem pendidikan. Ini biasa kita maklum, kita ada masjid, ada kata tim, tempat-tempat pendidikan awal lah. Okey. Kemudian apa lagi? Ada fiqh, perkembangan ilmu fiqh yang semakin meningkat. Kemudian apa lagi? Madrasah An-Nizamiyah. Ini pada zaman Saljuk lah. Okey, kemudian apa lagi? Al-Mustansiriyah pada tahun 625. Semuanya lah banyak institusi pendidikan yang dibina pada zaman kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah. Dan tidak dilupakan Baitul Hikmah. Baitul Hikmah tu adalah antara yang paling utama lah dalam data kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah. Oh, habis dah. Okay, jadi macam itulah. Sedikit sebanyak berkaitan dengan poin-poin penting berkaitan dengan kerajaan Bani Abbasiyah. Nanti ada kesempatan kita akan jumpa kembali. Saya akan tandakan saya akan kita akan bincang kembali nota-nota penting yang ada dalam modul ini. Dan saya harap jugalah siapa yang beli tu bolehlah cetak untuk mudah kita buat nota nanti kan, buat tanda-tanda sikit insya-Allah. Okey, baik, saya rasa dah setakat situ sajalah kuliah kita pada hari ini. Kita dah tengok video dan kita dah pergi sikit berkaitan dengan modul. Jadi kalau ada apa-apa soalan boleh tonton kembali video ni ataupun tanya dalam kelas nanti pada minggu depan insya-Allah. Okey, dan boleh teruskan buat tugasan. Saya ingat nak bincang tugasan waktu kelas tapi tak apalah, nanti dalam minggu depan. Terus buatkan tugasan dan boleh mulakan siapkan artikel tu, dan kalau dah siap boleh teruskan dengan video. Kalau ada apa-apa persoalan boleh tanya saja di grup. Nak tanya dalam grup saja pun tak apa. Jadi biar semua kawan-kawan boleh maklum juga kan. Kadang-kadang kalau WhatsApp saya ni ataupun hantar mesej kat saya tak perasan. Apalah mau balas. Okey, saya rasa itu saja. Okey. Apalah, nanti boleh tonton balik video ni insya-Allah. Okey, itu saja. Wallahu a'lam. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam Muhammadin wa ala alihi wasallam. Jangan lupa lukis peta macam biasa cuba lukis dulu. Jadi, kalau sempat untuk kelas esok nanti saya akan kongsikan lukisan daripada saya. Boleh lukis balik. Pastikan jangan tinggal nota tu. Okey. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam wa ala alihi wasallam. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Syukran Ustaz.
Waalaikumsalam.
Okey.
Terima kasih Ustaz.